Welcome in, everyone. I'm the real John, and as much as I hate clickbaity titles like this, there's not really a better way to describe what's happened to me. Let me provide some context. Firstly, for the uninitiated on the term, parasocial relationships are the kind that you have where it's not necessarily one sided, but it's not a complete two-way relationship like friendships, familial, or romantic relationships are, and often are formed with either a public persona or a fictional character. The term was coined by psychologists Richard Wohl and Donald Horton in 1956 as a way to describe the relationship between celebrities and their fans with the rise of mass communication. Basically, these relationships are parasocial or beside the normal social relationships because the audience only sees what the performer and the performer's PR team allows them to, whether that's real or not. You could also describe the relationships fans have to fictional characters as parasocial. That one is especially one sided, as all the fans have is whatever the creators have released and any fan creations that the people decide to include. The thing is, parasocial relationships aren't inherently bad. It is true that parasocial relationships are the impetus behind things like stan culture and can make it easier for people to be taken advantage of, be it financially, emotionally, or sometimes even physically, by the more prominent person within that relationship. At the same time, many performers make great use of their parasocial relationships with their audience and fans to help foster welcoming communities for otherwise ostracized and isolated groups, particularly queer and neurodivergent people. They can also use their platforms to help raise money for charity, driving small donations to organizations that otherwise may never have gotten them. Parasocial relationships can also help people to form stronger relationships with friends, family, or significant others through a shared love and appreciation of the person in question. This video isn't to say that parasocial relationships are the problem. This video is to say that I have a problem with parasocial relationships. For my backstory, if you haven't met me before, first off, hi, I'm the real John, and I use this deer avatar that I drew myself to talk about movies and other stuff that interests me, such as the times parasocial relationships exponentially worsened my depression and anxiety. I'm a 37-year-old who is on the autism spectrum and also deal with the aforementioned anxiety and depression, and due to a particularly bad job I worked at, have also a good case of PTSD. The thing is, I never used to have a problem with parasocial relationships. In my adolescence and young adulthood, I may not have had a lot of friendships, but I made solid connections with people I knew offline and never really relied on forming relationships with personas I watched online or fictional characters to fill that void. That started changing rapidly as we head into the 2020s. Looking back, I think the root cause is threefold. Firstly, I took on a terrible job that gave me PTSD. That was immediately followed by the first wave of COVID hitting and the lockdowns. And to top those off, I stopped using the main social media platform that connected me to people I knew personally and could see offline. Without getting too bogged down in the details, in 2019, I took a job in a halfway house for men. I specify men because this unit was specifically just for men, not women or co ed, who were supposed to be exiting jail or prison and, on paper, was supposed to serve as a means to help them re enter society and not return to prison. Instead, it mainly talked down to these guys, never took the real reasons they ended up arrested and imprisoned seriously if they ever addressed them individually at all, and honestly served as essentially a means of bilking the state of taxpayer money, as far as I was able to tell, because quite frankly, I got along better with the so-called clients than my coworkers or employers, and could tell both from observation and the guys at saying as much that they were basically being kept there and not actually being helped, even as our employer touted the great work that they were doing. Suffice it to say that working in glorified corrections was not good for my mental health, especially as concerns over fentanyl were constantly rising, and things finally came to a head when in quick succession I had a panic attack on the job and was then rushed to the hospital thinking it was a heart attack, with my next day back after that ending with me having to help physically restrain one of the guys in there who had secretly taken some kind of drug and ended up getting assaulted in the process, and then breaking down in my supervisor's office the next day back after that, and then being offered the chance to leave the job, which was ultimately their way of getting out of paying me unemployment and avoiding any kind of lawsuits, I found out. I had to have the unemployment fight through the courts over the phone in January 2020. Chef does not recommend. After being traumatized by the worst job I ever had, I returned to living with my parents at their suggestion after 4 years of living on my own in my great aunt's old house, just as the lockdown orders were put into place for COVID, meaning I wasn't able to meet up with any of my local friends for that whole time. And during that time, our game night group basically fizzled out anyway, and I ultimately stopped being social with anybody I knew offline. Namely, because I also stopped using Facebook around that time. Admittedly, I was already starting to get over Facebook before the pandemic, but by the time of the pandemic actually hitting, I couldn't use the site anymore. It was just a dumpster fire, and even just keeping up with the people I actually knew started feeling impossible. I had the same issue with Twitter, particularly after Elon bought it. That's when an entirely different thing happened to me. I discovered VTubers. I initially fell down the rabbit hole after Two Snacks, a brony artist I followed for years, best known for making the Two Best Sisters play videos, started making animations featuring this dog girl who spoke Japanese. And then there were more animal girls speaking Japanese in these cartoons, and soon enough I was finding the English language side of this whole agency of virtual streamers. And next thing I know, I'm watching a Puerto Rican Satan sing opera and bicker with her monkey best friend. And then I come to learn an acquaintance of mine from when I was in college was doing it too. And I began moderating for her and for other VTubers. And the next thing I know, I'm making my own Vroid. Except my potato of a MacBook at the time couldn't stream with a 3D model running off the webcam, so I relied on just a PNG. Now I too am the VTuber. Unfortunately, this is where we actually get into the title of this video. Following this series of events that irreparably traumatized me and left me isolated from my offline social circles, I started turning to more online friendships to try and fill that void. What didn't help matters was, as the indie VTuber scene started booming during these early years of the pandemic, it essentially created the same environment as the early days of people making YouTube videos when that started being successful. You had people rushing in thinking they could be the next Iron Mouse or Shy Lily or what have you, and in the process, you have all of these different subcultures clashing constantly, on top of the usual excessive competitiveness that comes with hustle culture jobs like streaming. So, as much as people are dying to form the kinds of friendships that they see other streamers seem to have, what seems to happen more often is people will drop each other, if not full on stab each other in the back, for the chance to slightly get ahead, and treat everyone around them as their competition and not as their colleagues, let alone their friends, even within those more famous streamer friend groups, as we've seen. That and people will just try to ruin each other's reputations over mild disagreements and misunderstandings while downplaying when someone commits arguably more criminal behavior because they actually like them or that person brings in too much money to leave on the table. To make matters worse, by being a VTuber myself, I had convinced myself that I was a colleague of everybody. Big or small, 2D, 3D, or PNG, we were all VTubers. That's what the feel good, happy posts we keep making always say. Except there's one big problem. I'm not colleagues with these people. At the end of the day, my relationship with them is still parasocial. I may know all about them from their streams and their social media feeds, but they didn't watch my streams when I streamed. They don't check out my videos when I remember to post videos. They don't follow my social media feeds. This relationship is not two-way, and treating it like it is a two-way relationship only ends badly. Case in point, without saying the person's name, one, because things ended on bad terms and this video is not about being a call out post on them, and two, because ultimately you knowing who I'm talking about isn't actually important to the story, but also the gender neutral language is out of respect for their pronouns and gender identity, for the record. I befriended a VTuber online right after the big Turf Wizard Blood Libel game fallout, as I like to call it, in 2023. We were both passionate about social justice. We shared a love for a lot of the same games. We would exchange DMs every so often, talking about various topics. And it turns out I even moderated for a mutual friend. Things seemed to go well enough for me as a member of their community until at one point in September of 2023 when I made a post on the VTuber Mastodon VTubers.social, venting about my struggles to recognize the difference between parasocial relationships and genuine friendships. This post was brought on by when said person who was playing Pokemon Unite on stream at the time said that they were only interested in playing with their friends for that stream. Now, they did nothing wrong in not wanting me to join, obviously. I was not owed that level of friendship with them, and it was a boundary I respected and left as is. My post was more about me venting my own frustrations about my inability to tell who in the VTuber space actually wanted to be my friend and who was more of that parasocial relationship, something that my autistic brain struggled with even more. I bring up the post because it's the closest thing I have to a reason for what happened next, which is I watched myself over the next 48 hours be completely excised from that community without notice or explanation. Granted, somebody being banned from a community is not owed an explanation, but the reason is usually pretty apparent. There's some clear boundary crossed, usually inappropriate language or behavior. This banning was not clear to me, though. I was just being banned from Discord servers and Twitch chats and blocked on social media accounts by the VTuber in question and anyone closely associated with them, including the VTuber that I moderated for. Like I told that friend that I moderated for that something was going on while this was going down, and then the next thing I know, I was banned from both that person's Discord and the Twitch, despite me being a mod for them. Now, everyone's boundaries and banning procedures are different, but from my own experiences in moderating spaces, I and the people I've modded for usually have this sense of grace and leeway that we give to people before banning them, usually as a warning or, that we laid out what exactly the issue was to give them a chance to improve, unless the violation was especially heinous or showed that the person was a danger to the community in some way. And I can't for the life of me guess what it was that I did beyond that post. And even so, that post in question didn't come off as so heinous to warrant the full nuclear response removal from that community. Whatever the case, needless to say, watching that happen in real time absolutely fucked me up. And there really weren't any people in the VTubing space that I could think to talk about it with. And because I'd lost touch with my offline friends, I had nobody to talk to about it either. Thankfully, as a longstanding member of her community and chat, when I mentioned that I was in a bad place mentally, Petrichoral was willing to listen to what happened to me off stream and provided a sympathetic ear, as did a different VTuber I still moderate for, Snerline. And the two of them helped me through the worst of that. I may not be personal best friends with either of them, but they've shown that I do have people in this space who care about me. I also came to learn from other people who were in that same community that I wasn't the only one who experienced that same treatment and for similarly vague reasons, and that things in that community weren't exactly all that great to begin with. But while knowing that to some degree helps, it doesn't change or take away that experience of seeing yourself removed from a community for seemingly no reason and being helpless to do anything to stop it. It wasn't just the one community either. Uh, I was banned out of the blue from without saying their name, especially given that it barely lasted a day or two before it was lifted and could have just as easily been some kind of moderator error or something like that. And the person in question didn't even know about it. But there was a much more prominent and popular VTuber whose Twitch and Discord I was banned from, out of the blue. Just I go to check in, and next thing I know, I can't access either. I'm gone. The Discord server is gone from my list, and I can't. And I go to the Twitch chat, and I'm banned. And I have no idea what happened. This one made even less sense because I was just a lurker at that point in time. I basically never said anything, especially since I wasn't able to make it to a lot of the streams because of work. Whatever the case was, that one solved itself, and I was left to remain a lurker. I don't normally suffer from any kind of paranoia, but I won't lie, both those ordeals ramped up my anxiety, something awful. There's a constant part of me that's always expecting to be booted from any community within the VTuber space that I'm in for no reason, just because it's happened to me before. I've been shown I'm only welcome for as long as I'm tolerated, and if I fuck up in any way, whether I even know it or not, I'm gone. No warnings, no check ins. With just a mouse click, I no longer exist to that space. Having that weigh on me constantly has basically kept me lurking in most spaces, unless I know for sure that I'm still welcome. And even then, I'm never fully sure how welcome I am and if or when that could change. That hasn't been my only issue with parasocial relationships in this space either. My biggest one, the one that's still a problem, is that I will sometimes become dependent on receiving the VTuber's attention in question instead of becoming a part of their broader community and getting to know everybody. The first time it happened was with this absolute sweetheart named Soymilk, right about the time that she hit partner. I bring her name up only because, thankfully, I was able to work through that issue and have since found a healthier place within her community and was able to enjoy my time in her streams without needing attention from her directly. And the problem is, I was able to handle this issue when it came to Soy, but the issue keeps coming up. It's reached a point where there are dozens of VTubers I made the choice to distance myself from just because I felt I was becoming too attached to them and that I wasn't able to enjoy being within the community they built around them, or felt that I would make things uncomfortable, if not worse, for them or the people within their community. There's thankfully still some places and some VTubers who've made me feel welcome and whose communities have welcomed me in just as much as the VTuber has, but it's very clearly still a problem, and the last thing anybody needs is for my problem to become the community's problem or their personal problem. I think the fact of the matter is, without a solid friend group to rely on anymore, I've ended up turning to these people that I only really know as ones and zeros. And despite how open and supportive I would be for others, I never really had anybody else I could ever reasonably turn to when I needed that support structure, which I have been needing more and more as things have gotten worse, both for me personally and in the world around us. While some people have been willing to offer their time to listen to my issues and give words of encouragement, I always feel hesitant to seek out their support when I need it because I always feel like I'm inconveniencing them and burdening them with my problems, and that they don't truly want that, nor should they have to deal with that from me. I constantly see these relationships around me as glass houses built on foundations of sand, ready to crumble and shatter at any moment if I do anything to disturb them. So that's where I find myself with other VTubers. I get too attached to people who aren't interested in or have any intention of being my friend, then pull back hard to avoid making anything worse. And even when I find a space where no matter if or how often I'm told openly that I'm welcome there, I'm always expecting to be booted out of it with no warning since it's already happened to me more than once. The good news is I have been working on this with my therapist, and I've reconnected to at least one of my offline friends and have been meeting with them outside of the house, so I can at least have some grounding outside of VTubing. Admittedly, I don't know why I decided to make this video. Like, it's not specifically to garner any sympathy from people. Whether I get that or not doesn't really matter to me. I guess I felt like I needed to speak to my experiences in case there have been other people who have gone through this something similar to me, to let people know that you haven't gone through this alone in this space. This space can really take it out of you if you let it. Look for the people in your life, whether they're in VTubing or not, who'll keep you grounded in reality. And if you excuse me, I think I'm gonna go touch some grass. Feel like that'll do me some good. God damn it, they said there'd be grass out here!